Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollack, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and construction expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living it. Real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades fire and the rebuilding effort. I'm Joel Pollack here with Oren Ezra and Ron Goldschmidt, and we are bringing you an amazing episode with a very special guest, Joey Ben-Zvi, who's going to talk to us about real estate and the future of the market in the Pacific Palisades, Malibu area. But let's start with some news. Oren and Ron, this is just breaking as we are sitting down here to record the podcast. The LA Times reports, headline, LA recovery czar vents at Harvard Westlake over working for free. Quote, I was lied to. This is Steve Soboroff venting at an event at Harvard Westlake and apparently saying some pretty harsh things about LA Mayor Karen Bass. The story is by Julia Wick and David Zanizer, and let me just read you a bit of it. Steve Soboroff, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass's wildlife recovery czar, wildfire, you can tell I still have Temescal Canyon on the brain, went public with his frustrations about doing the job for free, telling an audience he was, quote-unquote, lied to and had the texts and emails to back it up. The remarks made to an alumni group at Harvard Westlake School last week came as Soboroff attempted to address what he called, quote, the elephant in the room, end quote, the city's initial plan to pay him $500,000 over 90 days and his subsequent decision to work without pay after an outcry over the size of his compensation. Blah, blah, blah. On Thursday at Harvard Westlake, Soboroff said he found himself at a point where he had, quote-unquote, no money and, quote-unquote, no contract, according to a recording of his remarks. So they got a tape of this. Quote, so then I found out that they really didn't have the money, end quote, he said. Quote, and then I found out I really did have the personal bills. And so there was one of two things to do. Go public and quit and say I was lied to. Here's my emails, here's my texts, here's all this S-word, end quote, he told the group. Quote, or tell them I'll do it for free and hope that it comes around later on, end quote. So, I don't know. He said he was going to work for free, but maybe it's going to come around later on, whatever that means. By Monday, Soboroff changed course, telling the Times he did not think that the mayor had lied or intentionally misled him. Quote, that was not what I feel and not what I meant, end quote, he said in an interview. Now, I had heard about this story already, so I knew this was coming. I just didn't know which outlet was going to break it. I didn't feel like I could do it because other journalists reached out to me, without naming names, and asked me about it. I did reach out to Steve Soboroff. He couldn't talk to me. He was out of town for family reasons. So somebody was going to come up with the story, and it was the LA Times. And they've actually been pretty good on this story. So it looks like Steve Soboroff, who's supposed to lead the recovery effort in the Palisades, has no confidence in the mayor. He's at odds with the mayor. She's tried to diminish his role. He denies that his role is diminished. It's a mess, gentlemen. It's a mess. What do you think, Ron?
The whole thing, from the very beginning has kind of had a bad start to it and a bad scent to the whole, the whole hiring of Soboroff. He might be a perfectly nice man. I don't know him at all, so I'm just saying, like, from an outsider's perspective, it seemed to me that he was brought in immediately by Karen Bass to try to cover for her on areas where she might not be as knowledgeable about, such as rebuilding. But nobody really knew him from outside of the Westside maybe community in terms of on a national rebuilding. He never really got vetted. It kind of was like a quick hire, and then very quickly he came in under the label of czar, which is already kind of it's a hard pedestal to satisfy if you're going to be under that role. And then there was a story a couple weeks ago that his role was diminished, and now he's going to be only the czar of the business district in the Palisades. So there's been mutterings. It all seemed not well already for a few weeks. And so now this, I can't say it's surprising because there's like been a bad whiff around this for a while. Then there's the people that are asking questions like, why is this billionaire being hired and getting paid a lot of money to run a rebuilding effort? Like, I'm never going to begrudge somebody for like wanting to earn what they're worth. So I certainly think he has the right to like earn something. I don't know what the statement is like when it comes around to getting paid later. I think that's like brings a whole other questions. But basically, like, I think it got off to a bad start. Seems to be getting worse. At some point, it's probably going to have to be severed. Is my feeling.
I don't think he's a billionaire. He actually says in this article, quote, "If I was a billionaire or 100 millionaire or a 20 millionaire or a whatever, I probably would have done this for free from the beginning. But I wasn't, I'm not, and I didn't," end quote.
Interesting.
What gets me, Oren, is that he's talking to these elite audiences. So Harvard Westlake alumni, that's a pretty elite group. And he also did a private webinar for the Hollywood agents. I've actually invited him to appear on this podcast, and he has declined so far. We would love to have him on. He'd be welcome here. We would be very fair with him. But he does seem to have this penchant for speaking candidly to groups that not everybody else can get into. I don't know what your reaction is, Oren.
So I don't know, like for me, it's another piece that getting me upset. And this week I was like, the last week and this week I'm getting more and more upset from everything that's happening, and you're adding to it right now. Because I'm still trying to figure out the whole debris removal thing, and I know that I'm stuck on it, but I'm stuck on it same like another probably 99.9% of the people. We're like on stage one, and it's like I don't know how to say it differently. It's a shit show. Nobody knows what you're supposed to do. There is somebody that is supposed to manage this process. And apparently now, I don't understand if he's staying or not staying. And he already fights with the mayor. He's getting paid. He's not getting paid. Like, they're fighting over this thing. But what about us? What about like the 10,000 people that need to clear our lots and need to know how to clear our lots? And we were talking about it like here, I think like 2.5 weeks ago. Why don't you copy-paste what Ventura County did and give us exact direction on what can we do? I don't know if you guys know, but like suddenly a couple of days ago, the county added that in order to remove your debris, you need to have a hazard license required. Hazard license usually is required only if you're removing debris with asbestos. So now you need to have a hazard license as the person that's removing your debris. You need a permit, to do like every stage right now, not just like to remove the debris, also to take off the building, although there is no building, but you need a permit for this one. Now,
wait, you need a permit to demolish a building that doesn't exist?
Yes. Yes, you need a demo permit, but even though the building does not exist. So another thing is like I went back and I talked to a couple of demo people, and I asked them, hey, you know what? Let's say it's a regular situation. There is no fire, nothing. How much it should really cost to remove the debris from my house? They all said $15,000 to $20,000. I said, okay, now let's assume today you have all the traffic, you have everything. Let's say $40,000 to $45,000. Can somebody please explain me who is getting this $170,000 that they're going to charge our insurance? And if it's not the Army Corps or FEMA that is getting this money, where is this money going? Why are we not able to get like very clear instruction on how to remove our debris? Why everybody is pushing us to sign up with the Army Corps? And I'm sorry, I know that you started on something else, Joel, but
no, it's a good segue. I sat down with a woman named Elaine Culati who lives in Castellamare, and she told me today that there are massive problems with debris removal because it's not clear where the debris is supposed to go, and there's not enough room for it if you take out the Calabasas landfill because people there don't want it. And it may have to go out of state, but there's no plan to transport it. So we've actually invited her to be on the show in the near future to talk about that, talk about other things in real estate and the future of Palisades. So the debris removal piece is still very important. We've also invited Lindsay Horvath, the supervisor from LA County for the area. I talked to her a couple of weeks ago at the official debris removal kickoff, where they had the big flags and the mayor was there, the governor was supposed to be there. And I said to her what you told me and what we heard on the podcast, which is that there was no process that the county had put up for private contractors to do debris removal. There were problems with permitting problems. And she said, no, we're going to sort it out by the end of the week. Well, obviously it's not sorted out yet, and we need to talk about it. But she has at least tentatively agreed to come on the show. So we may have Lindsay Horvath on the show. We can ask her directly. Other news before we get in. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just saying, I would be very interested to know if after they put out the process to get a permit, if there is somebody from the city that is actually sitting in front of the computer, acting like it's his own house and trying to get a permit. I think that will be like a great question to somebody at the city to understand. After you guys are writing this, because I went through it today with Gital. I went step by step trying to understand what needs to be done. And guys, this is complicated. It's not like easy at all to understand. Let's even start with the licenses that you need in order to remove the debris. So I think they need to simplify it. I think they need to do it quickly. We already lost, we could start working on it like a month ago.
Yeah, so. And I think the Soborov issue reflects basically what is going on here, which is when there's I say this at my company all the time, which is when everybody's in charge, nobody's in charge, and so you have this mix of individuals. Everybody has their own constituency and fiefdoms, and they have to work with each other. But I think the Soborov issue is just, he's supposed to be the czar. I mean, to me, a czar means somebody who's going to have authority about the process. I mean, aside from being on a couple of press conferences, I haven't seen him do anything other than in terms of factual rulings or anything to help the process. Nor have I seen a lot of other folks. So I think again, we listen to these statements working hands in hand, and we just don't see it yet on the ground. And it's something we've been warning about. I think that it's very evident that there needs to be more leadership. And it's starting right now in debris removal, probably ebb to other things, but we'll call it out on the show as we see it.
Ron, to your point, just to quickly jump in here, I think the leadership needs to allow the leadership to happen. And the reason I say that is, I have some insight that some of the top developers in Los Angeles, both residential and otherwise, sat down for a private meeting with Soborov last week. And I didn't expect this news to come out. I thought he was just sharing it with, a tight circle, but he shared the same concerns that he didn't feel like he was being given the tools to actually go ahead and lead us to a successful rebuild. Obviously, this is something that's going to take a massive amount of coordination on a lot of levels. And to me, what it sounded like is that he's simply not given the tools.
All right, so Joey chiming in there. We'll give you a formal introduction in just a second. We want to just get through one or two more news items here. Monday, Gavin Newsom held a press conference, and while we're all focused on rebuilding, Gavin Newsom still focused on the issue of homelessness, and he's come in for a lot of criticism because the state has spent billions of dollars on homelessness, and the homeless population keeps increasing. So he launched a website today called accountability.ca.gov, and it's supposed to provide a tool to hold California government accountable. And I think this is a response to some of the criticism that we've made, that when you spend money in California, there's no telling where it's going to go, what it's going to be spent on. And that's one of the arguments for having a special master who controls the federal funding for the rebuild after the fire. But anyway, he had a press conference, and I was actually able to ask a couple of questions. And if we have that clip, Oren, let's play that clip.
Our next question comes from Joel at Breitbart. Joel, please unmute yourself.
Thanks, Governor. Two questions. I'm on the website right now and I see the results in terms of housing, homelessness, behavioral health. I don't see the money spent in each county. How can we hold the government accountable if we don't know what is actually being spent to achieve these results? And then a second question, do you think it is appropriate to sign $50 million of spending to fight the Trump administration while also asking the federal government for $40 billion in fire relief aid?
Well, I wouldn't frame the question as you framed it. The state of California, as you know, prepared many, many months ago for a new administration to protect and preserve our policies, our progress, and programs that the Trump administration is directly looking to deviate from. This is well-treaded territory. We were involved. I wasn't as governor. I served 2 years under the Trump administration, or with President Trump. Governor Brown served 2 years with President Trump. Over that 4-year period, there were 122 lawsuits. So there was some expectation that many similar efforts from the original Trump term would be replicated in his second term. And the whole point of putting $25 million up to the Department of Justice, our state Department of Justice, was to prepare for that. High-speed rail, perfect example. And in so many ways, we were prescient in that respect in terms of putting those funds up in anticipation of the efforts happening in the second Trump administration that happened in the first Trump administration. As it relates to the additional $25 million, that is not specific to Trump. It's about protecting people's rights. It's about getting people to get the kind of private support they need from nonprofits and other local organizations to address their anxieties and fears. And that was done in council and partnership with the legislature. Now, on the specific issue of money spent, money obligated, you'll look on that site. It does reference the money spent, money obligated. But I also made a point earlier. This is an iterative process. We're just rolling out the top line, and we're going to break down with more specificity, more detail, a lot of that information along the lines that you wisely and appropriately recognize or certainly reflect in your question. And I should note there's so many based data sources on that and audits that have been done locally, regionally, statewide, et cetera. And so we've got to just square all of that, and we'll provide that information, and we'll be updating the site with much more detailed and nuanced information. Final point, though, the source information in this site, on this site, the original source information also provides a lot more detail in that respect. But we're just trying to clear that up and make it easily readable and ultimately machine readable so that it populates itself without the kind of manual inputs that are required today.
All right, do you guys get all that?
The first 80%, it was total word salad. It was just like digging some hole to nowhere. And then the last 20%, he got to the meat, which basically said we're going to roll it out. It does not much out. To me, the whole thing sniffs like a little bit of damage control to what's happening on a national level. Like, he knows that there's a lot of eyes on the crisis right now and what's happening in California and with the wildfires and just in California in general within the national consensus. And so he's rolling out this accountability thing, calculator, online. And so I think, so basically as a form of damage control. And to me, that seems like, let's see how detailed the numbers are going to be. Great questions, Joel. I defer to actually seeing it before I make any further assertions, but I'm doubtful.
Well, look, we don't want to have to spend too much more time on this, and Joey's been very patient with us, but it's just infuriating because they are spending money on this, and you heard him reference high-speed rail. Trump is auditing the California high-speed rail. They've spent $16 billion, and they haven't put a train on the tracks yet. And you've got people sitting here wondering if they're ever going to be able to rebuild their homes. They don't have insurance. They've lost everything. So we have money, but we're not spending it. on anything. Oh, and by the way, while you're talking about homeless people, how about the thousands of people who don't have homes, who've paid taxes for decades in some cases? Anyway, it's just crazy. And he thinks that it's important to spend $25 million to defend California's policies. Are those policies working? I think that's the question you have to ask, especially after, our town burned down, basically. So anyway, let's bring in our guest who's been very patient and who's going to give a lot of insight to us about the future of Palisades and the real estate market in general. Go for it, guys. Bring him in.
Joey, welcome to the pod. I've known Joey for many years, mostly through playing basketball with him. He's quite the baller, so I'll give him that right away off the top. But aside from that, he's the co-founder of BZP Group, which is operating under the agency in the Westside in Beverly Hills, California. And he's renowned for his high-profile transactions all over LA. He's also a native of Brentwood. And so he has a kind of like a lifelong attachment to the West Side and real estate here, and he's done a bunch of big deals. He's also quite a little, from what I understand, he's quite a celebrity by being on the show. Is it Buying Beverly Hills or Selling Beverly Hills, Joey? Which one is it?
Whichever one you're doing. Whichever one
Okay.
you're doing.
Can I rent Beverly Hills? Right now, I'm only in a position to rent.
I haven't seen the show, but I hear he's quite a celebritant. So Joey, welcome to the show, and glad to have you here. Tell us what you've been up to lately.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the kind intro. As a West Side guy, it's absolutely devastating what has happened. I think there's just a little extra layer or less of an arm's length away, just being in my field of real estate. I think in the first, I want to say 2, 3 weeks, it felt like every 10 minutes, a new client, a new family member, a new friend was calling overnight, everything gone. And this is a story that, of course, you guys are familiar with yourselves. And, Ron and Oren, we got a chance to catch up for a second before the podcast. Ron, I have the most amazing memories playing basketball in that front yard. So, to me, obviously this is business, but it's really been, personal. Just working around the clock and really, I mean, it's kind of felt like I don't want to overdo this by any means. The firefighters and the actual first responders are heroes. But being able to find property and put a roof over people's heads when it was absolute pandemonium that you guys are again familiar with was a rewarding process and continues to be. Um, Obviously, we're still learning new things every single day. Um, I don't think we even to this point, we're almost 2 months since the fire, over a month and a half. I still think to this point, we really don't have a real grasp on just how bad the damage is. And I think that's why having a podcast like this is so valuable. I'm not a real estate attorney. I'm not an insurance adjuster. I don't have a crystal ball. Um, but I do, I'm in the trenches. So at the very least, I can offer that perspective. I can share some stories with you and at least give you some insight. But one thing I do not have for you is answers.
Well, let's try to get some answers, and maybe we can all achieve some kind of at least better education on what's going on in the market. I understand the market is
Or at least better questions.
yes better yes better. Like I understand, like right now the market is very bifurcated. Like there's a big disconnect in what's going on. So let's maybe start actually with the rental market, because that's a whole
Yeah,
other. Let's
I
start with
actually
that.
I think let me give you a little bit of a perspective and background on kind of what I've seen since day one, and then we can go from there and let the questions flow. Um, you know, eh, right from the start, it like I said, it felt like every 10, 15 minutes I'm hearing of someone new that lost everything overnight. Um, Pretty quickly, we saw that all of our rental properties that were sitting on the market, struggling to move, all of a sudden each one had at least 10 applicants on it. And as we're putting these deals together, we're learning of new rules. Penal Code 396 is something that I've become all too familiar with. And I don't know if you guys want me to give you a little bit of background on the rules there, but essentially that's a price gouging penal code. And it is criminal. This is not, some civil matter. If I, as a broker, break this penal code, or you, as a landlord, break it, you will go to jail. So it's serious. And at the same time, most people, both on the tenant side and on the landlord side, to this day don't know what the rules are. And definitely during this crunch time period where people were scrambling for housing and continue to, they certainly didn't know. So I'll tell you just on a basic level, if your property was listed or leased in the last 12 months, you can only increase the price 10% and an additional 5% if it comes furnished. Now, if your property hasn't been on the market before, it has to adhere to the housing and urban development standards for rent times 160%. Now, I don't know if you've ever gotten a chance to look at those standards and to compare it to the rents in Los Angeles, but it is nowhere near market rent. Nowhere near. In fact, if you take those numbers and you apply it to most properties that have been purchased in the last 5-10 years, most of them you'd be losing money if you put your house on the market. So what that ended up resulting in is constricting the housing supply further. So the tenants are left with even less options. The one exemption was if the property was leased for a year or longer. Now, in order to try and solve this issue, Newsom came out with a new ordinance, and in that new ordinance, he took out any rental caps from any homes 4 bedrooms and up that hadn't hit the market. The same rules still apply with if it had been on the market or if it had been leased in the last 12 months, max rent increase to 10%. Now, if it hadn't been on the market, it doesn't have a rent cap if it's 4 bedrooms and up, but 3 bedrooms and up now with no exemptions have to adhere to the housing and urban development standards for rent times 1.6. And what that has caused in the last week or two since the new ordinance has come out is a complete constriction in the 3 bedroom and below market. So I'm seeing a lot of ineffective lawmaking, and it's frustrating being in my position to see that with so many good families. A lot of them are, close friends, people I know in the community, people that have been referred to me, and a feeling of it's my neighbor. So it's been horrible to watch, and right now there's nothing we could do. That new ordinance is being revisited March 8th, but
So
the
what are the
rental market
landlords
has
doing?
been a
What are
mess.
the landlords doing? They're just not putting it on the market because they're afraid of the penal code?
Some people are taking the risk, hoping that, you know, they won't prosecute if it's irrational, which is to me irrational. But um, I would say, again, it goes back to if I have a client that wants to do it, consult your real estate attorney. I would say right now is a more important time than ever. If you're doing any real estate transaction in the Los Angeles area, no matter how big or small, I think it's worth consulting attorneys because there's so many, ordinances that are coming out, new laws, new rules. It's just a lot to keep up with. And even as someone who, again, is in the trenches seeing this all day, uh, you can't rely on anyone other than your attorney and yourself. Everything has some inherent risk these days. I
Do you
guess
think the
like
market
all
would function better if we just got dumped all the rules for this event and just let the market decide on its own?
I mean that's an argument for free market. I think certainly that there's ways to do it right. And 100%, if you put a blanket statement for everything 3 bedrooms or less, that it has to adhere to these certain rules that are not and have never been reflective of market value. I want to be clear, it wasn't reflective of market value pre-fires. Um,
Mhm.
I think that should be obvious enough that you're not going to get any new inventory on the market that hasn't been listed or leased in the last 12 months. And
So,
I've
so
seen
you have
that.
clients right now that are not putting their properties on the market because of this?
In fact, I had a property on the market that got 10 applicants. It's a brand new, 2 bedroom condo in Westwood, really, really nice, done up. And there's older people in the Palisades that could justify going to something really nice, but downsizing. And that was this. Pre-fires, again, it was worth similar to what we put it on the market for. We let it go 10% above our asking price. Even though, since it hadn't been on the market before at this time, if it was a year plus lease, we were exempt. I just wanted to really follow the spirit of the law in addition to the letter of the law.
So let's just
When
talk
one
about
day
the.
into this listing,
Yep.
they ended up passing this ordinance, and we had to take the listing down. And even though we had a tenant, we couldn't make the deal.
This is different from the measure EULA, which we can talk about as well. But you're strictly talking about rental property, and
In light of the state of emergency, correct.
is this separate from the price gouging rules that
This
they
is
have?
the price gouging penal code. Penal code 396 is the price gouging.
Okay, so what's crazy about it is that normally you'd expect prices to go up if you have 23,000 people suddenly entering the rental market in a relatively small area. And the other thing is, my wife and I had this issue. We wanted to sign a shorter lease on a rental property, but the owners couldn't take the risk of a short-term lease. They wanted a longer lease. So we said, we'll pay you more per month to have the shorter lease because it's better for us to have this short-term lease because things are up in the air for us. And they said, we can't do it because of the price gouging statute. Like they couldn't get us a property that we were willing to pay more for because they said, if you pay more than whatever value, then we could go to jail. I mean, that's the
And,
reality.
and not only that, up until last week, if you were to take the risk of doing a year term or less, even if the property was priced below market value, you could face jail time because the only way you were exempt from these rules was a year plus lease. And now, in order to, solve for that, they made it so that 4+ bedrooms don't have rental caps, completely neglecting the rest of the market. And especially in Los Angeles, you have a ton of, we'll leave 1 bedrooms out of it, but in the 2 to 3 bedroom range, there are so many multi-million dollar, whether it's condos or homes. I mean, and that is reflective of the market.
Can you
That's
guys imagine
never changed.
the jailhouse conversation? What are you in for? Well, armed robbery. What are you in for? Grand theft auto. What are you in for? I sold an apartment or I rented an apartment, for less than a
By the
year.
way, to a family that needed the housing, I did
Right.
something good. I provided housing. I put a roof over this innocent family's head that lost everything overnight, and now I'm sitting in jail.
I suspect behind all of this is some bureaucrats that have never worked a day in their life in the private sector or have been real estate impacted or involved at all. And that's unfortunately, we're seeing this not like this is the same thing that happened with insurance, by the way. Like, overregulation, which leads to a really bad, maybe good intentions, but it leads to a bad situation. And, I could talk about rentals all day, but we have a timeless. I want to move on. Let's move on. If let's move on to property values, and what are you seeing, Joey, on the ground in terms of lots for sale, lot values, where what the calculus behind what people are thinking to do with their lots right now, insurance? How does insurance play into it? What are you seeing?
This is where I can confidently tell you that the answer is no answer. What I will tell you is just my observations based off, again, being in the trenches. We'll take a case study. There's a property. I'm not even going to say the neighborhood within the Palisades just because there's not enough inventory and I don't really want it to be something that people catch on to. Um, but there's a property that hit the market for 3.3 million and it was a 6,000 square foot house. So the formula that we've been given is that you can rebuild same height, same footprint, same square footage plus 10%. So assuming that we have the ability to rebuild 6,600 square feet, it's something of around there. The cost of building, let's break it down for a second. The cost of construction is certainly expected to go up. And I actually was involved in a deal where the appraiser has said that the property value is down, the land itself is down 30% simply because they have no metrics other than expected construction costs to go up by 25 to 30%. I mean, there's a few obviously other factors to that as well. But so let's say it costs you 500 a foot to build
Hold on,
this
hold on.
type of prop.
Let's just pause right there. The property
Yeah,
value,
go ahead.
the lot value, you're saying is down 30% on a burnt lot, or like a lot that's that building that's no longer there,
On a on a burnt
on a burnt
well
house.
on a burnt house. I mean, burnt done house.
Yeah. So if it's worth 3 points, it was worth 3.6 before, or was it after
No,
that
no,
it's worth 3.6?
no, no. So and that's another question. Let's say we were trading in this market. Maybe the property's 7.5, 8 million, 8.5, 9 million. Um, we don't know what we're exiting into. So let's just take, for example, so you have this $3.3 million lot. You have, again, it's being sold for that number. That's not the
What was it
value
worth?
of what that house,
What was it worth? What was it worth before?
let's say very conservatively around 8 million. Because the
Okay.
conservative number, let's base it off of 1,200 a foot.
Okay.
So
Okay.
at that, it's around 8 million.
Right.
Now,
Okay.
let's just simply run the numbers. If we're building a 6,600 and change house, we're spending, maybe it was 500 a foot before, now it's 600 a foot. Plus you have 8% a year of carrying costs. So that right there brings you to around 4.7 million. 4.7 plus the acquisition cost of 3.3, that's 8 million right there. And now we haven't even talked about ULA. So that's from the perspective of someone, deciding to purchase one of these lots. Now,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, it's a different calculation when you're someone who owns the lot already. If you're someone that owns the lot already, you're looking at that 4.6 number, probably closer to just actually, it's really closer to 3.6, 600 times the 6,600 a foot. Because the carrying cost is not going to be as high, your basis is lower. Anyways, it's hard to figure out if it pencils out because the other side of it is the speculation that we're going to exit into Pacific Palisades that looks more like an Aspen, Colorado, where everything is brand new. The things that aren't brand new are gems. Things are going to be trading for 5,000 a foot. Obviously, we're not going to underwrite it like that, but let's even just take a more realistic example and say 1,500 a foot. All of a sudden, that exit looks, really different and much more attractive. The question is, and this is as an end user or a builder, who's exiting into this neighborhood where you're living on a construction site? I'm sure this is something that you guys have discussed. What is the neighborhood that you're even exiting into? What does that look like? Who's going to take the first stab at it? And that's why, even though we're seeing, we saw a house that was listed for under $1 million get 60 offers and it's going to trade for 1.4. This house that I'm talking about has had no offers yet. It's a brand new listing, but is expected to get multiple offers and is mainly end users that live in the area that want to expand and buy more. I also was just made aware of a sale on Radcliffe that's going to trade just below asking, and that was all developers looking at it. So we're seeing a lot of different things here. Obviously, it's just based off speculation, and that's kind of going back to my point about who really knows.
So it
Um,
seems like we're just going through a process of price discovery right now. We're in the midst of it. It's going to
correct.
take a while. There's probably a big, you know, big difference between bid and ask, like right now, and what people expect to get versus what the market is offering. And that's probably going to continue for a while and until it finds an equilibrium. But that's what I'm hearing as well, which is like the expectations are different than what the sellers will want. At the same time, there's also like the whole other issue, which is like as a seller, if you're a seller, what the calculation that you have to make. As a developer, you kind of know you're going to buy a
Yeah.
lot, you're going to add value to it, you're going to sell it for higher. As a seller, you have the whole issue with insurance right now, right? And that's where I think a lot of the market is right now, trying to figure out what to do with their lots.
Can I ask you something?
Not only the
Yeah.
insurance, Ron, you also have the building cost that is unknown, and also all the permitting process that you don't know. You just don't know. Like you can build a house in a year, but the permitting can take you like maybe 2 years, maybe a year and a half. So
Correct, but
there's a
as an
lot of
insurance,
unknowns.
from an insurance perspective, you don't know, you don't even know yet what you're going to get
Yes.
Yeah,
because
well, the other thing is Joey mentioned Measure ULA or EULA, which is a tax on sales that are more than $5 million, and it's paid by the seller. So you've got that tax going in. And as Joey's suggesting, you may not know whether your transaction is going to fall under that Measure ULA. Joey, I'm hearing that Measure ULA or EULA, whatever you want to call it, is slowing down the real estate market so much that it could actually slow down the rebuilding of the Palisades. Because if you don't have inventory coming on the market, and it's not just homes, it's also public buildings, hospitals, apartment buildings, just about anything that's worth more than $5 million, you're not having building, you're not going to move anything. It basically sits on top of the market, and you're creating more uncertainty for the people who are trying to rebuild or figure out what their lots are worth.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the Soberoff point. He can be this great altruistic guy, but at the end of the day, people aren't going to help rebuild if there are laws and rules that are standing in the way of it. And I think it's as simple as that. There's even just going back to the debris conversation. When you guys were talking earlier, I meant to mention um, that I just heard a story the other day where I think it's the Army Corps, and I'm not even sure who exactly is making them do this, but a family had to return their debris to their property. They removed all the debris and they had to literally return it to the property in order to get the proper certifications. Um, if this is happening on a micro level, then on a macro level, when you're talking about 5,000 plus homes that need to be rebuilt, it just seems like an impossibility. Um, which brings me to my next point, which I can speak much more on. Um, I feel like I have few more concrete answers on this, which is the adjacent markets. And I know it might not be as relevant necessarily to you guys, as people who really care, love the Palisades, but Brentwood, Santa Monica, north of Montana, these markets, Beverly Hills and the Flats, they've absolutely taken off. It's been a frenzy. Even if you want to zoom a little further out, San Diego, Palm Springs, Santa Barbara, Laguna Beach, Newport, all these neighboring markets have seen a huge uptick in activity. And I think it's a little bit of a combination where you have your group of older residents in the Palisades that will never justify rebuilding again. You have your group of, you know, 0.01 percenters that are just going to buy another property in another neighboring market, um, which in a neighborhood like the Palisades, you'll have a much higher representation of those people than you would in another natural disaster. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see, and I don't know if I'm getting too tangential here, but I'm just thinking about people who also have their standing homes in the Palisades. I had a property on the market this year for 48 million in the Palisades that we ended up renting to a celebrity for around 90,000 a month. And every property around burnt, but that house is still standing. Obviously, the tenant is gone. Um, but it'll be very interesting to see what the market deems those properties worth. And I think a lot of it hinges on finding out the timeline on the simplest level. What is a realistic timeline of when the Palisades will even be back to neutral, not even back to what it was? So a lot of things that are, unfolding in front of us.
I think maybe just double click on a couple of really important points on the real estate market that maybe I'd like you guys to chime in on. So most of the Palisades, even though it's a very high end zip code, do not live in $48 million homes. Most of it, I'd say 80% is probably within this 3 to 6 million range. Okay, that's where the houses are worth. Now, if you're
And a lot of those people, that's the majority of their net worth. Go on.
And that's the majority of their net worth, exactly. And sometimes the house has been passed on from generation to generation, and there's actually the families might not be very cash rich, but they're house rich, and so now the house burnt down. And there's a couple elements that are in play here. So number one is insurance. Most people will want to rebuild for a couple reasons, or at least they'll at least initially go into the arena wanting to rebuild. And the reason is because they're going to get more money essentially from the insurance company, because there's a couple of clauses that are usually affixed to most insurance policies. One is the upgrade ordinance, OL, on most policies, which gives you an additional 25 to 50% on your dwelling coverage to upgrade to the latest code. So if you built your home 50 years ago and now there's new code, you're going to get extra money from the insurance company that you would not get if you were not to rebuild. Then there's another clause, which is the additional dwelling or extra building. In many cases, that's about 25%. And that's also if you rebuild that. So at the end of the day, if you rebuild versus sell right now, you're going to end up getting, in some cases, 75% more than you would with a cash payout from the insurance company. Okay, so most people are going to want to at least initially want to rebuild until they find out the building costs, right? There's also another tangential issue, not tangential, it's actually central, which is mortgages. If you have a very big mortgage on a property that is right now not worth that mortgage, some people may choose to walk away. So if you have, I'm just giving an example here, $4 million mortgage on a house that the lot is not worth $4 million right now, well, you have right now you're in the red on the property. So that might impact what you want to be doing with it. Maybe you might want to negotiate with a mortgage company. You might want to sell. You might not want to rebuild. You might not have the cash to rebuild, which is also a huge issue. Because in this environment, I don't think it's going to be very easy to get construction loans either, given just the uncertainty of the area and what's happening with mortgage rates, what's happening with fire risk, all of that stuff. Joey, can you talk about the process from a Palisades lot owner right now, and where do you see the brakes falling in terms of the calculations they need to take into place here?
Yeah, I mean, really the question is from what perspective? Do you want me to go through it from the
Yeah,
perspective of
yeah. I want to
someone that
go
has it?
down to the numbers, the minutia. We love that here.
Yeah, I mean, on the insurance side, I've been trained not to talk about it. But I will say that in the scenario where it's someone that has owned the property for decades, at the very least, their basis is low. They're looking at it from a timeline perspective. They're 70 years old. They're looking at a potential, whether really conservatively speaking, 2, 3 years or not, and it's 5, 10, 15 years, um, where you regain that normalcy. I think that's enough of a reason for people to look at selling these lots. Obviously, a big consideration is what is the payout for from my insurance, and what's my replacement cost. Um, so I've already seen, like I said, a lot of the sales that are going down as of now are these older homes, these older people. Maybe it was worth $3 million before the fires. Now it's trading for somewhere between 1 to 2 million. Um, but yeah,
And they
from
probably
the
don't have big mortgages.
correct, correct,
Joy,
The people that are selling right
which gives
now,
them that flexibility.
just to clarify, it's mostly people that been sitting on the house. They're house rich. They don't have a big mortgage. They have an insurance payout. It might be a couple $1 million, $2, $3 million. Then they look at their lot. Their lot might be worth a couple to basically bring them to be somewhat whole on what the property was worth before. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Then we
Joey,
have an example.
what's your
Yeah.
advice? Let's stop on those kind of people. What is your advice for those people? How to maximize their sale of the lot? Like there is a lot of people that listening to this podcast, and they're listening to it because some of them want to decide if they're going to sell their lot or not. Some of them have decided, yes, we want to sell the lot. If those ones that are listening to us right now and decided they want to sell the lot, what is your advice to them in terms of like how to get the property, maximize the value with everything that we know? Debris removal, not debris removal,
Yeah.
plans, not plans. What is your like advice?
On a basic level, plans are valuable, debris removal is valuable. Not to say that in your due diligence you can find that it wasn't sufficient. I think that's a real risk, but that's why you have a due diligence period. I think, if you're closing with anything other than cash, it's tough. And now that's more from the buyer's perspective. Um, I would say that don't rush into it. These properties are going to continue to be worth more every single month that you hold on to it. That's again not a crystal ball perspective, but that's my belief, and that I think is something that will be proven over time. Um, Even with this case study that I brought up, it's a lot that actually is on the market for a very, very high premium if you look at it from a price per foot of land perspective, to the point where the developers in the neighborhood have actually reached out to, you know, some of the people involved in the sale and shared some upset because it's inflating the prices that they have to go and compete with. Um, I would say that maximum exposure right now, even if it feels weird, is the best way to go. Leveraging competition in the market, trying to price competitively. I would say all the things that apply to, a listing outside of the fire zone apply here. Um, and right now, you have this kind of window of opportunity where not as many people are jumping on the opportunity to list. And we're seeing that it's getting a lot more activity than I think we would have expected, all the land deals.
So I have a Facebook friend who's a real estate agent, and she's listing a property on Via de la Paz, which burnt down completely, and it's listed at 3.3 million, basically.
Hmm.
7,500 square foot lot. It previously had a house of just over 6,000 square feet, and that house was completed. This is not an old house. That house was completed in 2022. So the house was basically 2 or 3 years old, and it burnt down. 3.3 essentially for the lot. Phase 1 has been completed, which means the EPA has decided there's nothing hazardous that they need to be concerned about. Phase 2 hasn't been completed, and it says here it has to be completed by the buyer, so they haven't opted in for the Army Corps removal. You've got to find the contractors to remove the debris. Essentially, these are people who just want to get out from under their lot and leave, or maybe speculate as to what people would pay for it. And
Yeah.
I don't know that so many people are going to do this, but let me just take a step back. I mean, Joey, what's the future of Pacific Palisades and Malibu as real estate investments? And Oren mentioned the decision to sell might be easier if you have a small mortgage. For those of us with big mortgages, what do we do? I mean, it's something we don't want to lose hold of. We love the community and we love our home and our houses.
Yeah.
But what do you think the future really holds?
I mean, it's a great question. I was sort of getting into, comparing it to some of these elite markets like an Aspen or a Manhattan. Um, I do think it's something very unique. We obviously know what this neighborhood was pre-fires. It was an idyllic slice of heaven. And, obviously I have rose-colored lenses thinking about it being someone who grew up here, but I also transact with all the people who move from New York and move from Europe, and their dream is to be in the Pacific Palisades. So I've witnessed that firsthand, and I also am intimately familiar with the microclimate of the Pacific Palisades. And I think we all understand that it is a very unique setting between the mountain and the sea and being so close to Los Angeles. I just think if you look at it from the basic fundamentals of real estate, you can't replicate it. So imagining that same neighborhood coming back with a whole new look, so much more new inventory. Everything is, built to the nines by people who not only have money, but really care about their neighborhood. Obviously, there are going to be a good amount of people that are testing the market and seeing what they can get, whether, it's someone with a higher mortgage or not. If they have another opportunity to buy something else and maybe they can use this value of land as their down payment and figure things out that way, then great. But listen, I think probably we're going to see over the next 2 years around 750 lots hit the market. That's not representative of the majority or even close to the majority of the people that lost their homes. I think that we have a really, really passionate neighborhood that cares. And I think that there are too many sophisticated investors that are too smart to let an opportunity like this pass. And right now, we might not see the vision, but when people come together, and I think we know a few of those, a Rick Caruso, for example, when everyone puts their heads together and we can actually get things going, maybe more effective from the private sector than it is otherwise, I think the Palisades is going to be what it was and much, much more.
So
Wow.
I agree with you, Joey, but I want to ask you for a second to put on your pessimistic hat. Now, give me the counter argument to that.
Well, don't we have a pessimistic clip in there somewhere?
We have to know that we have to know the market.
much
We have to
easier
know the
for me.
market.
Wait,
I know it's easier for all of us, and we're all like,
clip. He
yeah,
doesn't
like-
have to be the pessimist. Why don't we have
Yes.
that clip that we
yes,
prepared?
put on the real estate clip. This
They want to move back to the Palisades. Are they considering moving elsewhere? Do they?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Look, this is hard to say. I strongly believe that 50% of the people who lived in the Palisades are not going to be moving back to the Palisades.
Why?
Yeah, and honestly, that number wasn't as big last week
Yeah.
in my mind, but after the phone calls that I've been getting, people who are moving to Brentwood, Santa Monica, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, those are going to be the markets that are going to go up. because people want to be as close to normalcy as possible.
Yeah.
And those towns right around the Palisades.
Yeah.
Those are going to go up, that market. That's where they're going to move. It's going to be too long. You got to realize Palisades is the all-American town, right?
Yeah.
The families are running around. It's like what you picture towns in movies that we used to watch.
Yeah.
These kids that are 5 years old right now that live in the Palisades and go to school, there's a chance that if things don't move fast, it could be 4 to 5 years before they're back there. These kids are now 10. They're going to different schools,
right,
different lives now, so it's tough, because picture you living on a street, you're the first house finished, and every other house on the street is in construction.
Yeah.
Think about that. You don't want to do that. You want to wake up every single morning and be reminded of that.
Right, it's traumatic.
I'm negotiating almost a dozen deals right now on land in the Palisades, much faster than I ever thought I would be doing. People are already trying to sell their dirt, knowing that they're not going to go back there, to home builders that will then build their house and either keep it or sell it.
So because obviously some people with the Woolsey fire, this could be their second time rebuilding with Malibu and stuff like that.
It's just hard.
Who's going to move to the Palisades, or are we going to see that city kind of
The calls that I've got have been across the board of, I'm 70 years old, I just evacuated from my last time, I'm out. I'm never going back.
Where are they going?
Okay, that was the Palisades. So they're either going locally, or because of, they're fed up with the regulations and government, they're out. California, and if they're not and they're out of LA, they're going down to Newport Beach.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
I'm getting a huge amount of calls from people who want to move down to Orange County.
Really?
Yeah. Majority of the people, unfortunately, because I've been on the phone with my insurance agent for hours every day.
Yeah.
Majority of the people were heavily uninsured. And that's an issue. And that's why they're not going to go back to the Palisades.
Yeah.
Because in order to recreate the house that they lived in, their dream house, they're not going to be able to afford it. And that's just the horrible thing.
Joey, this is a clip, by the way, to those who can't see what we're watching. Is Josh Altman, I believe, is the name, real estate agent on the Westside. This clip is a couple weeks old already. Joey, what do you think about that number? 50% is not moving back to the Palisades.
Unrealistic. I think there's too many people that have built. I mean, listen, I'll speak on my own experience. The families that I've been dealing with, they, like he said, want to regain normalcy as quickly as possible. And that's why we've seen this humongous uptick in activity between Brentwood and Santa Monica. But the sentiment of all these renters and buyers alike has been that the reason that they're staying so close is to get back. Their intent is to get back. Having said that, I think he made some really good points. If you're a family with kids, all of a sudden, if it really does take 5, 10 years, your kid who is in high school one day is now graduated from college. I think that's a real consideration. I know, Ron and Oren, you have kids. I don't know about you, Joel, but I'm sure that's something that you guys have thought about. And I know that's a conversation that is being had with all my clients. But I also have to think a little bit, not to hit on a fellow agent, but I have to think a little bit about self-interest, as he's been moving a lot of his operations to Newport Beach and Orange County. But I don't know. We don't have to get into that.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I have 4 kids, and the issue he brings up of kids getting used to a new place is one that you think about. And there's also something else, though, going on, which he didn't touch on, and that is, well, he sort of mentioned people moving out of California. Yeah, so he did mention it. But I think there's also going to be a huge push for change in how we are governed and how we govern ourselves, because I think whether you vote Democratic or Republican, people feel betrayed by the government in this whole situation. And people are going to rebuild, and that's what everyone's focused on right now. First, recovering possessions, seeing their lots, clearing the debris, getting the plans, all of the fighting with the insurance companies, all of that stuff. But people also want to make sure that this never happens again. And that means I think people are going to try to take a little bit more control of how the town is managed, how the state is run. And I don't think it's going to fly anymore to tell people you're creating an accountability website without any money on it. He said the money's there. I was on the website. There's no money there. I think that people are just going to demand greater accountability in a real sense, and responsibility and competence. And it could be that the push from the Palisades helps all of these other communities, helps Brentwood, helps Santa Monica, helps LA County, whatever. I do think that the feeling of wanting to come back is very strong, but also wanting to come back in a different situation. And maybe people are taking a break from California for a little while. But if you can rebuild the Pacific Palisades in any way, Joey, I think that you do it, and you do it with better systems in place, better leadership.
Agreed.
Let's hope, but don't forget, guys, we have a lot of like underinsured people, like we said. We have a lot of older people, and we have a group of people that like us, for instance. Our son is going to go into a different high school in 2 years, 3 years, when the house is done. He's a senior. We're not moving him back into to Sunset Mesa. So I don't know if 50% is the right number. But I get a feeling that in the next 5 years, a lot of the people are not going to go to the Palisade unless there's going to be a change of exactly what you just talked about, Joel. People will be able to rebuild quickly, and it needs to be clear. It needs to be very clear, like to us, how long the permit is going to take, what exactly we can do, how much it will cost. And
Steve
we'll know
Soberoff,
these things.
We talked about Soberoff, in the beginning of the show and his fight with the mayor. But one thing he did say was that he thinks Palisades will be rebuilt, but it will be rebuilt after a turnover. He said you're going to see 3 generations turnover in 5 years, because you're going to see people sell and then sell to other people. There's going to be a lot of turnover while people shake all of this out. And that could happen. Yeah. But for those who can stick it out, if you can afford to, right? If you have the insurance, if you have the ability to rebuild, it might be very rewarding.
Right. Yeah. I think you'll see I think you see a lot of folks also stay within the Palisades or Malibu and maybe just change their lots, or like move to a condo, or do, correspond to like their life changes. Maybe they have kids that are now in high school. By the time they're done. They'll be in college. They'll have kids out of the house. Maybe they'll downgrade. So I think like the 50% number might not be far off if you include all of those people. Like the ones that are like kind of like shuffling internally. What do you think, Joey?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That I think the turnover is a lot different than, these people really leaving the Palisades as a whole. And even again, going back to some of these examples of the lots that are available now, certain lots have attracted developers and other lots have attracted only end users. And again, I asked, who are these end users? They're all locals. So clearly there's still a major pull from everyone that has lived in the Palisades to the Palisades. The question is, what moves make most sense for these owners? And it all depends on how they're insured, depends on what market they're exiting into, and what are the rules and regulations. So these are a lot of unknowns that we need to find out.
So many dynamics at play here, right? Like,
yep.
Like it's insurance, it's mortgage, it's lots, it's available lots, it's a discrepancy between bids and offers right now in the market to a level that we haven't seen in recent years. It's liquidity, honestly, as well. Like, that's a huge factor. Like, do people have the cash to rebuild? Do they have the cash to, if you have the cash to go up, buy a lot right now, and maybe it's your dream lot, and then you can sell, you can hold 2 lots, that's a fantastic position to be in. But most people are not in that position. And so I think that even leads to more price discovery uncertainty, which is going to last for a long time. So, but I think at the end of it, I think if I'm reading between the lines on like the tarot cards here, is like, if you can hang on to your properties and your lots in the long term, I think we will see a different kind of like reality here than what we have here. And I kind of agree. I personally agree with Joey. Like, we will come out the other end stronger than we are right now. It's just a matter of like being able to hang on to those lots, and some people are just not going to be in a position to do that, unfortunately.
Joey, any last thoughts? And tell us where we can follow your business, your advice, your recommendations, and everything you're doing.
No, I guess the final thoughts would be is that we're all in it together. As someone who, again, born and raised on the West Side, and feels so close to not only the people but the places. I think that we should all have hope. We should all work together and just continue to figure this out. Because if you feel lost, you're one of many. But if you want to follow me, my Instagram is Joey Joey Ben-Zvi. So JoeyBen, Z like zebra, V like Victor, I like Isaac. I run the bzp-group.com is our website, BZP Group. And maybe you'll catch us on another season of Buying Beverly Hills or some other nonsense.
And in about 3 years, you'll catch Joey on my basketball court. Hopefully getting
Amen.
posterized.
Amen.
Hopefully getting posterized by me.
Joey, can I suggest a spin-off show? Can you start a new show called Buying Pacific Palisades?
Totally.
That'll help.
Yes.
Totally.
Featuring
That'll help.
3 homeless guys.
Oh, I love it.
Thanks so much, Joey, for being on the show. Thanks from Ron, Oren, and me. And that's it for Three Homeless Guys. You can reach us at pod@threehomelessguys.com. Always welcoming ideas, suggestions, feedback. And until next time, stay safe out there and stay strong.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Three Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out threehomelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@threehomelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.